The new top-level domains launching later this year and for the next few years creates a unique investment opportunity. So it's no surprise that private equity and venture capital firms are evaluating the new GTLDs and registrars. We're going to talk to one of the consultants helping investors outside the domain name industry understand this opportunity, and we're going to learn a few things in the process. Stay tuned.
3 messages before today's show. First, if you're a domain name investor, don't you have unique legal needs that require domain name technical know-how and industry experience? That's why you need David Westlow of Wiley Ryan. Go search for David Westlow on Domain Sherpa, watch his interviews, and you can see for yourself that he is intelligent and articulate, can help you with buy-sell agreements, deal with website content issues and UDRP actions, and can even help you write your website terms and conditions. David Westlow is the lawyer to call for all your internet and intellectual property needs. See for yourself at newmediaip.com. Second, when you have questions about domain names, where should you go to ask them? The answer is dnforum.com. Not only is DN Forum the largest domain name forum in the world, but it's the best. You can learn about domain names in the industry, buy and sell domain names, talk about domain name news, and meet other domainers just like yourself. Register for a free DN Forum account and begin advancing your skills and knowledge today. And when you do sign up, send me a friend request so we can connect. My ID is Domain Sherpa. Finally, whenever I'm thinking of buying or selling a domain name, the very first place I go is estabat.com. Their service provides quick and comprehensive information about the valuation and the critical factors that you need to know about, like other extensions that are reserved, recent sales, search volume, and cost per click rates on search engines. And if you haven't tried their lead generator service for domains you want to sell, you're missing one of the most powerful tools around. Those are the reasons I pay for the service every month. Here's your program.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name entrepreneur and investor directly from the experts. Many domain name investors look at the new top-level domains being launched late 2013 and for the next few years and are not impressed. They remember being burned by buying tens or hundreds of worthless .mobi or .info domains. But what they don't realize is that of the more than 1,400 new top-level domain applications, many will make a significant return on their investment, regardless of whether domain name investors think it's a successful top-level domain. So today we're joined by Frank Michlick, founder and consultant at DomainCocoon.com. Frank is a domain name industry veteran, a technologist, and co-founder with Adam Strong of DomainNameNews.com. Frank, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Michael, for having me.
Frank, how much interest is there in investment in the domain name industry today?
Well, that's hard to tell because I don't think everybody necessarily ends up coming to me. But I mean, I'm listed on some of sites that solicit like consulting calls for people that want to learn about a specific industry. So I think in average, there's maybe like 12 calls a year or something like that. It's not a huge amount, but there's not that many people running around with lots of money in their pockets either. So it's probably not a bad cut.
Yeah, but similarly, if you look at DN Journal, Ron Jackson's website, and you evaluate the weekly sales and you look at, the let's say $1 billion in aftermarket sales that happen per year, roughly. Maybe it's, 700 million or somewhere around that order of magnitude. There's probably 2-3 times more aftermarket sales of domain names that happen every single year that don't get reported.
Of course, yeah. Of course. Yeah, so I guess there's, of course, investments happening as well that we don't know about and people that wouldn't talk to anybody, but yeah.
Sure.
You're right.
We've all heard of the Donuts.co and their investment by KKR, Silver Lake, and Technology Crossover Ventures. Do you know of many other institutional investments of this order of magnitude within the domain name industry?
Well, I wouldn't really be able to mention anybody that is not public, but I mean, there's certainly other, like take the GoDaddy investment that happened, or even further back in time, if you look at maybe not at not a good example, but Internet Real Estate Group and the guys down in Houston, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what the acronym stands for either, but IR.
Yeah, I tend to mix them up with the guys in Boston, so that I'm trying to be careful not to do that. Because
Right. Okay. So there has been some institutional investment in the past, and I think a lot of people do look at it from time to time. And so that's going to be today's focus. We're going to dig down deep into why investors, more than just single domain name investors, but why a fund or why a private equity group might consider investing in the domain name industry and what they might invest in. And we're going to dig into those details. But I always like to take a step back, Frank, as you know. I briefly discussed your background as a technologist. How did you first get into the domain name industry?
Well, I did register my first name back in, when was it, 1995, I think. Like we wanted to have actually we were programming, like as students, we were programming websites on the side. So we needed a company name for that and a website, of course. So I had to learn what does it take to register a website, what the heck are name servers and so on. So we learned all of that back then, and probably wasn't registering the right names looking back, but that's just how it goes. You
look back and kick yourself for not registering some generic keyword category defining domain names?
Yeah, we were all coming up with these nice fantasy names back then, right? That
Do you remember what your very first domain name registered was?
Well, this company was called cyberteam.com, so that's the name. I actually had a few offers in between for the name, but it's sort of you're personally attached to it. You have I still think the corporate identity and the design that went with it was really good, so I didn't really feel like letting it go.
Yeah, so you still own it to this day?
Yeah, actually now it's in my company. There's not much left from the original company, so we were like five co-founders, so that was a big group of people to start with.
Cyberteam.com. And back in 1995, did you actually have to fill out the paperwork and mail it in or fax it into?
I believe at that point there was a web form to fill out, but you did get the invoice in the mail afterwards. Yeah. So.
Excellent.
Unfortunately, I didn't keep that paperwork either. I did from Network Solutions back then. So that would be a nice thing too.
It would be a nice thing to frame on the wall. How many domain names do you currently own today, and how do they shake out by top-level domain?
In the company, we have about 1,100 domains. Most of them would probably be .com. There's a larger group of .cas, naturally, because I'm located in Canada. Mm-hmm. Not that many DEs because of my background. I actually would probably be expecting more. But that's a big space overrun with lots of investors already. So, and I have some, when new TLDs launched, like in the, well, not new TLDs, but when .es relaunched the second level registration, I had like a few names there too that we registered, and a bunch of them sold by now in like a 5-year frame. So that's sort of it. I don't consider myself a hugely successful domain investor, really, but we're not out after parking money or traffic names generally. So
I'm sorry, I spoke you.
We're not out after like parking and traffic names so much. Generally, the majority of names are like things that I sort of know about or that I'm interested in or that have to do with what our company does. So with Domain Cocoon mainly.
So what would be some of your 2 or 3 of your best domains, not including, or your favorite domains, not including Domain Cocoon or cyberteam.com? What other domains do you have that you're proud of?
Actually, Domain Cocoon is a really bad name. Most people don't know how to spell cocoon, I noticed. So that's why I had to buy a bunch of typo of it. It doesn't pass the phone test that I tell other people about all the time. So, but yeah, I don't know. Back then, one of the other favorite domains that was registered back then is really rules.org, rules.org. Really makes for a nice play with subdomains and so on. Like even now, I'm still toying with the idea to set up like a wiki for soccer.rules.org and so on. But I don't know. I don't really have. I don't know. I don't think the other domains are that great. There's one adult-related domain that is a German word in the .org, and where the .com actually sold last year. So I'm trying to maybe follow up on that, but we'll see how that goes.
Gotcha. All right. And are you investing in, or do you hold a stake in any of the new GTLDs that are coming out soon?
No, not really. We see like Domain Cocoon as a company certainly sees an opportunity to consult some of the new registries, and we were talking about opportunities, but there's no actual investment in that space, or where we own shares, or I own shares, or anything like that.
Okay, so you're speaking completely from an unbiased perspective. You're not going to mention one GTLD over another and say, "Oh, I'm definitely a fan of .eco," and in the background you've got a small stake in .eco. You're okay.
No.
So
I wouldn't say unbiased. I certainly have an opinion about a lot of things, but
oh, good. We want to know
that doesn't mean that I'm right about it.
So let's start with a fictitious scenario. You're called by a private equity company. Some company calls you, or send you an email, and they have a bunch of initials in their name, and you give them a call back, and they want to bring you on to do some consulting about the GTLDs. One of the first questions they're going to ask you, most likely, Frank, is how do you explain the GTLDs to our partners? How do you explain the opportunity that will be coming out in the upcoming years?
Well, generally, actually, I even sometimes take a step even further back and say, so what does the space look like? Who's earning money in the space, and where's the majority of the money made?
Okay, let's start there. How does the space look?
I actually had investors too that aren't necessarily, or I have talked to people too that are not necessarily interested in the new GTLD space, but also in the space in general. So that's why I would start with that. Actually, back from the days when I used to work at Tukaus, we still have the like a list of what is it called? They used to call it the 5 Rs. Somebody marketing at Tukaus that used to work came up with that. So it's not really quite accurate for how I like to explain it, but 5 Rs is the regulator, which is ICANN. You have the registry, which VeriSign or Newstar or other companies like that, affiliates. Then you have the next level, the registrar, and then the reseller, because in the Tukaus scenario, the reseller was a very important component, obviously, not really recognized by ICANN, the reseller. And the fifth part is the registrant, the one who owns the domain. And today, of course, when I talk about it, I can't leave the aftermarket out, but I haven't come up with a term that starts with R for the aftermarket yet. So I don't know. It's of course, which is near and dear to my heart as well. So
definitely. All right. So we've got the 5 Rs, and then somehow related to the aftermarket also. Of those 6 different buckets of the ecosystem, who makes the most amount of money, Frank?
Well, I would say well, we can't really count ICANN, right? That's a not-for-profit. So
okay, today it is. Who knows what it'll be tomorrow? So you're saying that ICANN makes the most amount of money?
Well, I wouldn't be saying that directly. I guess we have to look at the public reports again for that. Their salaries certainly aren't bad. So I guess there's some money being made, and they're holding a lot of money too for not-for-profit at the moment too. If you look at the application fees for the new GTLDs. And then, of course, the registries certainly make more money with domains itself than the registrars do. And that's sort of the part where some people are surprised that are new to the industry. They're just saying, what do you mean my margin is like this low on the registrar side, but the registry side might have a much higher margin? It's interesting in any case, to say the least. So that's why registrars need to upsell us all the time too.
Right. Okay, so we've got ICANN, who regulates the whole system. We've got the registries like VeriSign that oversee certain top-level domains. We've got registrars like GoDaddy that work through VeriSign to get access to the domain names to sell them. So they're like the retailers. You have resellers, so those are like partners to registrars.
Yeah, affiliates or like hosting companies. A lot of hosting companies would be in that setup, for example.
So in some cases, they will actually do the branding and sell the domain names and just use the back end of GoDaddy, so they make a commission or an affiliate revenue stream off of the registrars. And then registrants like myself who buy domainsherpa.com, I
exactly
pay it, and of course the aftermarket if I were to then sell the domain name. So we've heard a lot about GoDaddy and how they have razor-thin margins on the domain name sales themselves, but then they make up a majority of their revenue and profits by selling hosting and, everything else that they sell. They've got a million different things.
I mean, GoDaddy even charges for the higher-level domain parking, right? So
right.
One of the few parking providers.
Yeah. I heard that they actually recently bought an accounting system for small businesses. So they're basically looking at the entire life cycle of a small business and trying to serve every single portion of those. And
even more recently, a mobile website building company, sort of, I think. I didn't actually look at that yet, but MSpot or something like that.
Yep. MDOT.
MDOT, sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Okay, so is that kind of the overview that you give? Do you give any magnitude around the revenue produced in each of those categories or buckets for the industry?
Generally, I'm not being asked about that. I guess because a lot of that information is sort of, at least for the public companies, they can look it up, So
Right.
that's not something I look. I look at things mostly from I like to look at it from a whole picture, but I'm not necessarily a finance guy. So I'm coming from the technical side and trying to see what does attract users and how is the need for domain names developing over the future. I mean, and all of that is predictions anyways. It's not,
Yeah.
I don't know what is going to happen exactly.
Right, right. What kind of trends do you see in the registrar area? I believe that there was an announcement last week that some registrar bought another registrar. Wasn't that the case?
In the last week, I don't remember seeing that. I remember name.com was being bought by Demand Media, for example. That's
That
the
was a couple weeks
last
ago, wasn't
biggest
it?
purchase for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see a consolidation in the industry like that, where name media is larger companies are buying smaller resellers or registrars?
I think that's something that we will continue to see. Even in the hosting industry, there's just rumors being posted on some blogs about, for example, Host Europe getting an investment by a large equity company. So Host Europe has already bought a bunch of other domain registrars and so on. So there's an interesting consolidation going on. Or the biggest company certainly is Endurance International Group out of Boston that is buying companies and has been buying brands and sort of integrating all of those.
All right. So there's definitely investment in the new top level domains, and there's investment in the registrar area as well.
Yeah, sorry, to go back to the name.com purchase.
Yep.
So for Demand Media, that's certainly a real purchase where you can see the Demand Media is applying for new GTLDs, and so is their partner company Donuts. So you have a lot of GTLDs that need to be brought out to market. So they certainly have an interest to have an Name.com is more of an end-user registrar. Then Enom is already owned by Demand Media, and Enom is really a reseller channel. So they're bringing more end users into the company, and by buying a registrar, they certainly have a chance to create a bigger market.
Yeah, so it's basically a storefront. It's an additional storefront where they can bring in more end users to sell some of the domain names for the top-level domains that they hopefully will have access to in the future.
Yeah, I mean, name.com as a company is certainly more than just a storefront, but and the people there, like I've visited them before, are certainly great people. But it's obviously it's an addition to the channel for Demand Media. Sort of, I would see that they are probably seeing it as such, even though they're saying too that the company will remain a separate company and be run as such. But obviously, they might have some wishes regarding new GTLDs.
Yeah. Okay, so I understand the landscape of how you explain the industry to potential investors in the marketplace. How do you explain the top-level domains to financial investors?
Well, basically, we're talking. I would talk about the look at the historical other new TLDs that have been introduced, like .mobi, maybe .co, which was more a CCTLD relaunch, obviously, but country level domain relaunch, but technically also from a marketing perspective, very interesting how it was done, and probably a good example for new GTLDs what something that they could be doing in their space to launch.
Right.
And then at the people that are the companies that are sort of behind them, mostly, I mean, there's interest in obviously the larger players, but also people that don't come from the domain space, like Amazon and Google, that certainly have an interesting share of applications. That is drawing a lot of controversy lately too, with regards to them owning generics, which sort of reminds me of domain names too. I mean, obviously, it's just domain name investing and pulled to the next level, right, to the top level of the domains.
So, if you had to name the top 3 most successful top-level domain launches, regardless of whether it's a CCTLD or a GTLD, that have been successful, what would you name?
Oh, that's a tough question. You didn't give me that one in advance, so I'm not sure.
What? Frank, don't tell my secrets. I don't share any questions with you in advance.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, .co is certainly as one of the most recent ones, one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Interesting because also in the sense of they didn't go for the broad approach. They started with a few select registrars in order to get started and help market out there to startups and so on. So it was a very interesting approach. But then again, on the other end, you have .mobi, which certainly isn't one of the most successful ones, but they did go out to get people to build mobile sites and so on. Like the approach was good. Probably the timing wasn't good because it took too long to launch, not necessarily at their own fault, but it's hard. What is the next?
Yeah, it is interesting, and there's a new application for .mobile. So .mobi, individual investors would argue that it was a failure because they can't resell them. So if you look at the aftermarket, they look at it and say it's a failure because I can't resell my investment. But the registry is saying, hey, it was successful. Look at how many domain names we sold in the first year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it looks also. I mean, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I mean, obviously, the registry can make a profit already, even when it's not, like you were saying initially in your introduction, it's not necessarily a profit for the investors, but there can be a profit for the registry already at, like, let's say 200,000 domains or something like that, especially if the company runs other TLDs as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. One that comes to my mind, I've had Stuart Lawley on here talking about the .XXX top-level domain, and it seems like they are doing phenomenal. They hit a profit margin. They're looking at new ways to expand out and build off of that top-level domain with, their own wallet payment system and their own search engine and a lot of great ideas.
Yeah, they had to fight hard to get their TLD too. And ultimately that is probably where a lot of the money went initially. So it's good if they were able to recoup that. Obviously, not all the numbers there are public. So there are some numbers that came out with regards to how much went to the fund for donation to E4, but I'm not sure, or IFFOR. I'm not sure exactly how these guys are pronounced. But of course, I'm looking at numbers like that too and trying to see. So how did they do it? What did they do right? But it's very specialized too, of course. It doesn't necessarily apply to everybody else.
Yeah. What about .me? They were recently relaunched.
Yeah, they were certainly a very successful tool and are still comparable actually to .co, but in a broader approach. .co had a higher price level to initially, so .me came in at a bit of a lower price level. So Affiliates operates the back end there, for example, but they started on a broader range. They work with more registrars and certainly have a big appeal to individuals and so on. So they did a whole lot of marketing in the startup world as well. So, for example, they cooperated with I think WordPress is using wp.me as a shortener. So that obviously is a great win, sort of, to get public visibility. Now, when now we have 1,000 or let's say 200 something TLD launches, the latest date apparently from Fadi from the CEO of ICANN that he announced is actually that he's looking to switch or sign the first contract like in April, which surprises me because I was thinking we're more getting into the next year already.
Yeah.
Let's say we switch 200 live this year or 100 even. Like, how is everybody going to create the same visibility? That's certainly a big challenge,
Yeah, definitely.
Or does everybody even want to do that? That's the other part.
Yeah. So, let's say that Fadi does sign the first contract, and so the first TLDs get online this year. How long will investment opportunities last? Is there a specific window for investment in top-level domains, or do you think that a top-level domain may launch this year but may still be an investment opportunity 2 years from now?
Well, then we have to look at, are we looking at investing in domains, buying domains in the space, or are we looking at actually the people that invest in the companies running the TLDs?
People that invest in the companies. So we're looking at institutional private equity type investment.
Yeah, I would definitely look more, not like a hedge fund return where you get a quick return, but rather try to have a horizon of 3 to 5 years or something like that, because the initial investments to some extent can be quite high, especially on the marketing side. That's sort of the part that it's hard to cost out at this point, because we don't know how much it will actually cost to get registrars to integrate the new TLDs. And I do think there's a significant loss there, and I see for us as a technical consultant, we actually see a good opportunity there too to get a piece of that business. So I think there's a longer. It should be viewed with a 3 to 5 years horizon rather than like let's get my money back after a year or something like that. Even though the biggest money is probably in the sunrise phase too, initially, like in the trademark phase, you know.
Yeah. So the biggest return is in the sunrise phase, not necessarily in renewals, which, you know, registries may see a drop off in the renewal rates. People, you know, are claim stakers. They want to get in early. They want to claim some domain names, and they may pay off or they may not pay off. And if they don't, then people may not continue to renew them. So
that's right.
So
like average renewal rates are still above or around 70% if you look across all TLDs at the moment. So if we add a lot of new TLDs to that, I generally would probably expect a smaller drop, but you know, it's really too early to tell, obviously.
Yeah. So besides hundreds of top-level domains becoming available, trying to get integrated into certain registrars, and doing marketing with you know, many top-level domains fighting for a share of attention, what other factors add to the risk of an investment in a top-level domain?
Well, I think you have the main adaptation. Of course, right now, still we're in a phase where we don't even know which top-level domains may be challenged. To some extent, we had a legal challenge for .web, for example, or that sort of was dismissed by the court recently. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's more legal challenges from people that were operating alternative TLDs before or in other name server systems. And I don't know, there might still be some sort of challenges that we're not expecting, or like we're seeing right now for challenges against Amazon and Google and so on owning generic domains, like owning Amazon, good example, owning .book and .books. Do you really want them not to give this to anybody else?
Right. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and speaking to some of the other interviews that I've done in the past, that if, you know, a company has put in an application for a top-level domain and there are, say, 3 other competing applications, one of the factors may come in is that whoever has the biggest war chest may actually end up owning the domain. So it sounds like there might still be opportunities throughout the application process or out through the negotiation process of trying to resolve these conflicts around top-level domains. There might be an opportunity for investors to come in and help sway who gets that.
Yeah, there's a number of different scenarios, right? So we have the people can agree on this joining or getting rid of the application or withdrawing the application before the actual ICANN auction sort of is set to happen, where ICANN is trying to auction off the rights to some of the TLDs.
Right.
And I guess for the applicants, it's certainly better to try to resolve everything outside of ICANN, most likely if they can. And I mean, potentially some applicants may have even used this whole part as their strategy, obviously. Maybe that's their way to cash out, by just selling the application rights.
Yeah. How does an investor know if they're buying into a .mobi or a .co? How do they know, you know, what counsel do you provide to them to try and figure out which top-level domains are going to be winners versus runners-up?
Well, I try to keep most of the advice to the general level. I don't want to be nailed down afterwards for giving wrong advice either, obviously. But this is your example is an interesting example, because I think .mobi did a lot of things too right by trying to get newspapers and so on to build mobile sites on the .mobi. But I think the problem was really the time to market in this case. So that they were coming later than the .mobi should have been there. Everybody sort of had established a solution already. And of course, you don't really need a separate domain to tell if the site is for mobile. I mean, mobile traffic is increasing, and we're still, I think we're still seeing people not doing that properly, but obviously in separate TLD, top-level domain isn't really needed.
Right.
So
yeah, and
I think
sort of bring that up as an example that, you know, you don't necessarily, it's a flawed business model. You don't necessarily need a separate URL to show that it's a mobile site. Today we have responsive websites that, you know, responsively display for your iPhone versus your desktop computer.
Yeah, that's ultimately what should be happening, of course. So, because the user shouldn't really be going to different sites. So I think in that sense it's a good example where they failed, but the team was great too, that put everything together. Or look at even further back. .name is another example where the idea was you register your last name and you get an email address from the registry. That whole email address part sort of fell under the table and is not being done that much anymore. So the ideas aren't necessarily. I'm still waiting for seeing actually a new innovative model with the new TLDs. I think there's a lot of room for new plays. And I give credit to, look at Dotel, for example. I give a lot of credit to them for what they tried. They may not have succeeded in numbers in comparison to some of the other TLDs, but they certainly try to innovate, and somebody who does something always...
Most people watching this probably have never heard of the .tel top-level domain. So tell me about that. Why do you think it was innovative?
Well, .tel actually was about building directories under the domains, sort of, like, to summarize it. It's probably not necessarily what they intended when they set out, but basically... you get the domain, but you don't get to put anything on the domain. You create your own website under it in a templated system that the registry provides. So you have let's say you're a company, or you would have a list of all your different offices and locations and so on under there. So the idea was to have the contact points for your company or for your entity listed. So that's sort of the gist of the idea. And they were also hoping to get like a whole search engine benefit from it. Right. And so on. So there were a lot of some domain investors flocking to that space as well, but it didn't turn out to be as popular as people had hoped. I'm not sure if the registry still made money in the end, but
Yeah, I understand.
So it's really hard to predict the advance, but I would, if I were to invest in somebody like that, I would probably ask a lot of questions about the people running it and their strategies and their ideas to do it, and make sure that they have all their bases covered, so to speak, in order to see if they can have a chance at being successful. As you know, not every investment turns out to be successful, so obviously you run some risk anyways.
Yeah, definitely. KKR, Silver Lake, and Technology Crossover Ventures invested in GoDaddy when GoDaddy decided to sell a majority stake, and then of course Bob Parsons, who was the CEO, stepped down and is now chairman, I think, or somehow involved, but not in the day-to-day operating of the business.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
did you consult with any of those three private equity firms in the GoDaddy investment?
If I did, I wouldn't be allowed to say it. So.
All right, so you're basically under a non-disclosure agreement with anybody that you consult with to not reveal details associated with that consulting?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. All right.
And I would imagine if I were to talk about it, they would probably not want to come back to me.
Yeah, very good.
But it's really an interesting level of conversation, sort of, because they look at everything with different eyes. So that's what I like about the conversations. Actually, I'm toying with the idea to sort of set up a report as well that could potentially be sold to people like that. So
yeah, well, yeah, I would think that they'd want to know, if we put $100 million in this space, what kind of return on investment might we expect in a 3 to 5 year time horizon?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't answer that like that, but I think that would be a question they would ask. I mean, certainly they handle amounts of money. Some companies handle amounts of money that invest in the space that I think it would be very interesting to get my hands on. But it's very nice to talk to them as well. Yeah,
and we did talk. You did mention a 3 to 5 year time frame for investment, that they would need to stay in the market about that long. What kind of exit? How would an investor that comes in with a large sum of money, like 50 or 100 million, 200 million, how would they get a liquidity event to try and exit from that investment so that they can place another bet in the future?
Well, I guess what we've seen in the past is that registries like .name or .mobi were sold, right? So I think that's sort of the intention for a lot of investors in the space. I do think, though, that in the long term, we'll probably also we're seeing more investment companies entering the space, like as you were mentioning with the GoDaddy investment and so on. So I do think there's the potential is being viewed. I mean, we're still a rather small industry, and even if you add like the hosting industry to it, I think there's a lot of changes that will come and that are kind of important. I mean, that's also when I talk about growth, I'm not worried, and I have to look at it myself too. Where am I going to be in 5 years? Is this business safe for me to be in? That's sort of something I look at from time to time to make sure that I can support my family and the people that work with me. So it's always an interesting view in a time horizon. 5 years is relatively short, actually, still. But to say I feel safe here and I think there's going to be enough work. So obviously, I think there's going to be more money coming in. Look at the hosting industry itself. How hosting is sold today, I think it has to change because a lot of people don't understand what that means, actually having a website, and how much transfer they need and whatever that means. So I think there's still room for a lot of changes and money to come in here and to be made here too.
Yeah, definitely. No, and I experienced it as well. We have a local magazine and a lot of mom and pop shops who are on the web. They don't know where their website is. They still have their domain names in their developer's name. The registrant is the developer. And they find it difficult to try and manage their online presence. So I was talking to
I went to a restaurant here and we actually tried to book a table online and that didn't work, even though it looked like it worked. So we called, we said, what happened to the reservation? They said we didn't get anything. So I actually went into and talked to the owner afterwards, not to sell him, but I said, if you need help with that, it's probably going to take me 10 minutes to fix that part. Why not? Give me a free meal the next time I come or something like that, So it's an interesting. You can tell that the learning curve is hard.
It is,
and it shouldn't be that hard. So that's the part that we need to work on to make it easier.
So some innovation may drive additional sales in the marketplace.
Just like look at the adoption of premium domains everywhere. Nobody really knows where what premium domains are. Like, not the majority of people doesn't know where premium domains are. But go to the once a Super Bowl commercial and you search for a domain on their site afterwards, and you might see some premium domains offered to you. So the user they're starting to get the hang of it, and certainly GoDaddy is driving a lot of those aftermarket sales in general too.
So if investors are coming into the space, so if new top-level domains are going to be launched, and let's just throw out a random number because nobody knows how many domains are going to come online this year, but let's say 100 new top-level domains are going to hit the market today. It seems like GoDaddy is sitting in a sweet spot. Everybody wants to get access to GoDaddy's customers. They're the largest registrar in the world. They probably get paid a certain amount of money to highlight a domain name in their registration flow.
I'm sure they do. They should.
So registrars may be a good investment opportunity in the future, given that all these new top-level domains are going to need exposure and marketing.
They're going to need to be growing them. So look at the top 10 registrars, see who's public, I guess. I mean, ultimately, that's the key to getting to the users. But, however, with the lack of, or with the removal of the split between registries and registrars, we may see more registries to become registrars too. And maybe there's some new models out there too where a registry just sells directly. I mean, coming back to the network solutions days or something like that. Not directly, but I mean, maybe VeriSign could buy a registrar again or set one up again, for example.
So tell me about that, Frank. When was the split between registries and registrars removed?
Well, there was a long ongoing discussion about, I actually forgot what the icon called the term again, but basically there was a push from registries to also be allowed to sell directly. One of the strong or loudest voices in the discussion was certainly Affiliates, which originally, when it was founded, was owned by a bunch of registrars as well. So basically, for a certain time, registries were not supposed to own a registrar, and that has been effectively, the requirement has been effectively removed in the new GTLD guidebook. So that's something that I'm looking to and seeing to what is it going to bring, and obviously look at like brand domains too. They will need to operate their own registrar in order to be able to register their own domains, even if it's just within their own company.
Yeah. And are the registries generally private companies?
The majority of them certainly are.
The majority of them are, right?
Yeah.
Newstar's private, Affiliates, AFFILIAS for the transcriber. That's a private.
Oh, you mean the registries or registrars?
The registries.
Sorry. Yeah, Affiliates is basically private. Then VeriSign is public, Newstar is public. But the other ones like Oz Registry or ARI as they're called now, the guys from Australia, they're not public, I think. So yeah, a lot of them, I don't know. The bigger ones certainly you have some public ones, obviously, with
So
VeriSign.
Neustar and VeriSign are definitely...
Sorry, I was thinking about registrars before.
No worries.
And there, certainly the number gets smaller because you only have really Demand Media, Tucows, probably some other ones that I can't think of at the moment. And they're going to be upset at me afterwards.
Have you heard of any registries like VeriSign or Neustar that are looking to offer their own direct-to-consumer registry?
No, I don't know anything about that. But I mean, obviously, if I ran the backend for a new TLD or I applied for one myself, it might be... VeriSign certainly has an established channel, obviously, with all their relationships, and so does Neustar. So,
right.
But if I'm a new GTLD applicant and why not go direct to consumer? I mean, technically, that's something that should be interesting too. But a lot of them are not doing anything right now. They're waiting to say who's going to complain, who's going to be contention. We're going to have some more government comments soon, another round, see how those go. And as soon as they have they're all sitting ready to go, but they're not quite, they don't want to spend the money before they know that they're ready to go, which may actually be a problem too, because like I think for some registrars, it may just take a while to implement new GTLDs, to add them to the system.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the registrars weren't built from a technical perspective to actually offer that many TLDs, you know?
Yeah, definitely. One of the other consulting areas that you focus on, Frank, is consulting for registrars to help them do things like integrate new top-level domains into their offerings. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. Like we will help, for example, a hosting company to become ICANN accredited and set up everything that they need to do there. Help somebody to remain ICANN compliant, which is interesting too because they're doing a big audit at the moment, or they have done a big audit on all the registrars, and yeah, down to helping registrars to improve their systems, for example, and so on. Like, there's not that many contractors that have been working in this technical space for a long time. So, Domain Cocoon, like as my company, is sort of here's the advertising part, is sort of one of the fewer development teams out there that sort of has the experience with how to deal with the registries and what the business and ICANN requirements are too.
Yeah, definitely. You know, one of the things that I thought of when we were discussing is the size of the industry. And you mentioned, well, the size of the industry, not including hosting. And I think hosting is a big moneymaker for a lot of different registrars out there. But if we looked at just the size of the domain name industry, so we're looking at registries, registrar, resellers, and aftermarket, not including hosting or any of the additional sort of cross-sell, upsell opportunities. How big would you say the domain name industry is in itself?
That's really hard to say. I don't know, especially because of the aftermarket, because there's so many unreported sales there as well. So, I mean, this is of course a question that I ponder often too.
Yeah.
And I haven't come to a conclusive answer. Like a few years ago, there were numbers being thrown around, but I don't think that those numbers, I don't know if they're still accurate today. And like I said, there's also a lot of money being invested in the space, so right. That might change the flow of things.
You had to throw out just a swag, just a rough number. You can't verify nobody can verify it's correct.
Yeah, but
2 billion, 10 billion?
People are still going to comment about that. I think I'm going to be careful enough and not say anything.
You're not even going to give me a number, Frank. 2 billion, 10 billion? Order of magnitude?
Well, the old number that was thrown around a few years ago, because you mentioned it, was like 2 billion or something like that. But that was more for the domain name space itself. Right. I mean, parking certainly have changed a lot.
Yeah.
Over the last 3-4 years. So I'm hoping we're bigger than that. So.
Yeah. And hosting, of course, is a
yeah, you can't count that. The margins in hosting are nice too, right? Compared to domain names itself. That's why you always need to, or are trying to always sell something else with it.
What are the margins in domain name hosting?
Well, domain name hosting itself, like, I mean, hosting, the cost of running a server is not very high. I mean, anybody can buy like a reseller server for $20 a month and put 20 customers on there for $20 a month each. So you know your profit on that.
Yeah.
But for registrars, the domain name itself is sort of where you're sort of fighting against the margin. Your cost is like, let's say, average, well, $7.50 or whatever, or even in the $8 range, depending on which TLDs you look at and who's allowed to raise prices again. And prices are still increasing, even though technology is getting cheaper, which is really an odd, interesting factor all the time too. I think like certainly you need to sell some sort of additional services in order to make money or really work in domain names in volume, and who really does that in a big volume and has a big market share.
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see. Maybe there's some new player coming out too. Who knows?
Yeah. So anybody that's not familiar with domainnamenews.com, what can they expect to see if they go there?
Well, hopefully some collection of the latest news in the space. At the moment, we're sort of running a bit behind. We're trying to restructure a bit how the site works and how we work, but we try to cover everything that is happening in the domain name industry that is important. Obviously, the name sort of implies that, so it's not really a commentary site or anything like that. We want to cover everything that is in the space, and we'll be there again shortly, I think.
Great. So it's more of industry news to keep people up to date, not necessarily commentary, your personal thoughts about
we may add some of that
service at a certain company.
We may add some of it. You can also go to dnn.com. That's a shorter version of it.
dnn.com. Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Frank,
I also want to bring back the event calendar that we have. So maybe, it's certainly the domain industry itself is an interesting space, and reporting on it helps us to stay on top of what is happening too. So
yeah, great. And here's the final question, Frank, for the domain name investors, the individual investors that are listening to this interview and thinking more globally and strategic about the industry, but then at the end of the day, a lot of them don't have the opportunity to necessarily put money into a large amount of money into an investment like that, and they were going to buy individual domain names. What's your advice on the new top-level domains and in making sure that they make wise investments for the few hundred domain names that they may speculate on?
I'm starting to think this could cost me advertisers too, my answer to that question. So no, I think in general, I'm watching the new GTLDs carefully. So here's my own approach sort of to investing to it. So I think there's a potential to make money, but I also think people should have an expectation of the time horizon. I mean, obviously so far in each new TLD that gets registered, there's like a base of, let's say, 200,000 to 300,000 domains maybe that sort of get registered, generic keywords that may sell or may not sell. And I think if you're in that space, you're probably sort of in a safer bet. I personally like to do more in CCTLDs again too. Like I've done some exploring in that part and would like to do more. But I do think the new GTLD space is definitely a space to watch. I don't see it as a threat to sort of people that own .com names either, because I think until users will actually get used to the new GTLDs, that will take a while. So and in general, the mass of users is certainly not the most adaptive audience and the quickest audience when it comes to. I'm not saying they're stupid or anything.
Right.
It just takes time for people to get used to something.
People are hard to change.
Yeah, they type in .com, So
and when you say it's going to take time, what do you estimate the time horizon to be for them to understand what a .eco is versus a .com?
I always expect them to be faster than, I don't know. Actually, we had .mobi as an example earlier. So look back. In 1997, I think, the first specs for the WAP, for the wireless access protocol, were written. Look, and then see when actually people were going on the internet and mobile devices. You're certainly in the 2000s someplace, not in 1990-something. Right. So I guess a 3 to 5 year horizon, again, seems to be a very safe bet for people to adapt new TLDs. But like I said, the marketing could be aggressive. If you see a lot of brands using their new TLDs and so on, people may get used to it quicker. I mean, but like I said, in general, I think they're slow. So it's when you come into this as an investor, you want to make sure you come with it into it with the right time horizon, be it as a domain investor or somebody who's investing in new GTLDs itself or in the companies. You want to make sure that you are able to hang in there and to make your money back, and probably also make sure that you see when it's not a success, and you get rid of those names.
Definitely. Frank, if people want to talk to you about potential consulting or contact you directly, is there a preferred Twitter address or is there a preferred email address that you would like to tell them?
My Twitter account is FMICHLICK, so my first initial and then my last name. And Email, got too many for those. The most well-known one or the most interesting one is probably the i@m.fm.
i@m.fm. So Frank Michlick, of course, being the FM. You have your own top-level domain.
Yeah, right. not quite, I wish. But when I left Germany to move to Canada, I sort of I had to come up with a personal email address. So that's when I registered that single-letter domain back then. So yeah, I guess.
Excellent. Well, that is a fun email address to have. Frank Michlick,
yeah, you have to read it as I am FM. So
right,
read the @ sign as.
exactly.
Oh, actually, I have to do it this way. Sorry.
Frank Michlick, founder and consultant at DomainCocoon.com. Thank you for coming on the show and helping us understand the investment opportunity of the domain name industry and the new top-level domains. And thanks for being a Domain Sherpa.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.